Hello, my friends. I hope all of you are fine. This is the Narrative Stories channel. Let's start this story. Sarah and Mark had been the quintessential couple that everyone admired. Their relationship began as a high school romance, filled with the innocence and passion of young love. Over the years, they had built a life together, getting married soon after college, and pursuing their dreams side by side. However, as the years passed, life's challenges began to chip away at the foundation of their marriage. Financial pressures mounted as they struggled to balance their careers and personal lives. The stress of maintaining their lifestyle, combined with the demands of work, left little room for the intimacy and connection they once shared. Misunderstandings and unmet expectations began to accumulate, creating a rift between them. Instead of confronting these issues head-on, they each retreated into their worlds, Sarah focusing on her career, Mark on his hobbies. The distance between them grew, and their communication deteriorated. Arguments became more frequent, often over trivial matters, but with underlying resentment fueling the fire. The love that had once been their anchor now seemed lost in the sea of daily struggles. After years of trying to make things work, they finally reached a breaking point. The decision to divorce, while heartbreaking, felt like the only option left to escape the constant tension. Both Sarah and Mark were exhausted from the emotional toll of their failing marriage. After the divorce was finalized, they went their separate ways, each trying to rebuild their lives. Sarah threw herself into her work, determined to move forward, while Mark found himself lost, grappling with the loneliness of life without Sarah. The end of their marriage marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. But little did they know that their story was far from over. Months after their divorce, Sarah and Mark had settled into their new lives, albeit with varying degrees of success. Sarah, always the more pragmatic of the two, had managed to rebuild a semblance of normalcy. She moved into a stylish apartment in the city, filled her time with work, and began exploring new hobbies. Despite her efforts, however, she couldn't completely shake the lingering sadness and occasional pangs of loneliness that crept in during quiet moments. Mark, on the other hand, struggled more openly with the aftermath of their separation. The house they once shared now felt empty, echoing with memories of a life that no longer existed. His days were often spent in solitude, trying to fill the void left by Sarah's absence. It was during this period of adjustment that they unexpectedly crossed paths at a mutual friend's birthday party. Neither had anticipated seeing the other, and their initial interaction was tinged with awkwardness. They exchanged pleasantries, each trying to hide the surprise and discomfort they felt. However, as the evening progressed, they found themselves drawn into a deeper conversation. It started innocently enough, reminiscing about shared memories, mutual friends, and the lives they once led together. But soon the conversation took on a more intimate tone, as they began to discuss how they had been coping since the divorce. There was an undeniable connection that neither could ignore, a familiarity that felt both comforting and bittersweet. By the end of the night, they had exchanged numbers, agreeing to keep in touch. What had begun as a chance encounter slowly evolved into something more, as they found themselves increasingly curious about the possibility of rediscovering the bond they once shared. As Sarah and Mark began to spend more time together, their casual meetings soon gave way to deeper conversations that neither of them had expected. What started as light-hearted catch-ups gradually turned into soul-searching discussions about their past, their marriage, and the mistakes that had led to its unraveling. One evening, over a quiet dinner at a familiar restaurant they used to frequent, Mark finally broached the subject that had been lingering in the background of their renewed connection. He asked Sarah to be honest about why their marriage had failed. It was a question they had both avoided during the final stages of their relationship, too hurt and exhausted to engage in meaningful dialogue. Now, with the benefit of time and distance, They were ready to confront the painful truths. Sarah, after a moment of hesitation, opened up about her feelings of being overwhelmed and unappreciated. She explained how the constant pressure to keep everything together, managing the household, advancing in her career, and maintaining social obligations, had left her feeling isolated and resentful. She admitted that she had internalized her frustrations, which eventually manifested as coldness and detachment. Mark, listening intently, shared his perspective. He confessed that he had often felt inadequate, unable to meet the expectations Sarah had of him, and this had led him to withdraw emotionally. His pride had prevented him from communicating his insecurities, and instead, he had chosen to escape into hobbies and activities that took him further away from Sarah. The conversation was raw and emotional, with both of them shedding tears as they revisited their most painful memories. Yet it was also a moment of profound healing. For the first time, they were truly honest with each other, and this honesty became the foundation for a new understanding between them. In the aftermath of their heart-wrenching conversation, Sarah and Mark found themselves seeing each other in a new light. The walls that had once separated them emotionally had been torn down, and in their place was a newfound openness and empathy. They began to appreciate the changes each had undergone since the divorce. Sarah had become more self-reliant and confident, no longer the woman who had once felt overwhelmed by the demands of life. She had learned to prioritize her well-being, setting boundaries that she hadn't known how to enforce during their marriage. Mark, too, had grown in ways that surprised even him. The time alone had forced him to confront his fears and insecurities, and he had come to understand the importance of communication and vulnerability in a relationship. As they continued to spend time together, they discovered that the love they had once shared was still there, albeit transformed by their experiences. It was no longer the intense, passionate love of their youth, but a deeper, more mature affection, grounded in mutual respect and understanding. They began to rebuild their connection slowly, without the pressure of labels or expectations. They went on long walks, shared meals, and spent quiet evenings together, enjoying each other's company in a way they hadn't in years. The absence of the formalities of marriage allowed them to rediscover the friendship that had always been the cornerstone of their relationship. They laughed together, reminisced, and dreamed about the future, but this time with a cautious optimism that acknowledged the lessons they had learned. They knew that they were different people now, and that if they were to move forward, they would be as equals, with a shared commitment to honesty, communication, and growth. As the bond between Sarah and Mark grew stronger, the inevitable question loomed. Should they give their relationship another chance, or was it better to leave the past behind and continue on their separate paths? The decision weighed heavily on both of them, as they each grappled with the fear of repeating the same mistakes that had led to their divorce. Sarah, ever the realist, worried that despite their personal growth, they might still fall back into the destructive patterns that had once defined their marriage. She feared that rekindling their romance might only lead to more heartache, not just for them, but for those around them who had witnessed their previous struggles. Mark, on the other hand, was more hopeful, but equally cautious. He had never stopped loving Sarah, and the idea of rebuilding their life together filled him with a sense of purpose. However, he was also acutely aware of the challenges they would face. He didn't want to risk hurting Sarah again or proving their doubters right. After much contemplation, they decided to seek the help of a professional relationship counselor. They both recognized that if they were going to attempt a reconciliation, they needed to do it differently this time. The counseling sessions were intense and sometimes uncomfortable, forcing them to confront issues they had long ignored. They discussed their fears, their hopes, and how they had hurt each other. Through this process, they began to understand that their previous marriage had failed, not because of a lack of love, but because they hadn't known how to nurture that love amidst the challenges of life. Finally, after weeks of therapy and soul-searching, they made their decision. They would give their relationship another chance, but with a commitment to approach it with the maturity and wisdom they had gained. They agreed to take things slowly, prioritizing open communication, respect, and mutual support as they navigated this new chapter together. Months passed, and Sarah and Mark found themselves in a place of contentment they hadn't experienced in years. Their decision to rekindle their relationship had not been an easy one, but it had proven to be the right choice. They had moved back in together, not into the house where their marriage had crumbled, but into a new home that symbolized their fresh start. This new space was a reflection of their renewed commitment to each other, a place filled with light, warmth, and the memories they were now creating. Their relationship was far from perfect, but it was real and grounded in the lessons they had learned from their past. They continued
with their pursuits, Sarah with her thriving career and Mark with his newfound passion for writing. But they also cherished the time they spent together. They had learned the importance of balance, ensuring that their relationship didn't overshadow their personal growth. They found joy in the simple things, cooking dinner together, taking long walks in the park, and enjoying quiet evenings at home. Their friends and family, who had been skeptical at first, began to see the genuine happiness Sarah and Mark had found in each other once again. The couple's renewed relationship was built on a foundation of mutual respect, understanding, and the kind of love that had been tested by time and trials. They had learned to communicate more openly, to support each other's dreams, and to give each other the space they needed to continue growing as individuals. Their love was no longer about grand gestures or idealized fantasies, but about the day-to-day acts of kindness, patience, and forgiveness that sustain a partnership. In their new life together, Sarah and Mark approached challenges with a sense of shared responsibility. They faced disagreements not as adversaries but as partners committed to finding solutions that worked for both of them. Their relationship, once characterized by its tumultuous ups and downs, had now matured into a steady, reliable companionship. They celebrated each other's successes, comforted each other in times of difficulty, and most importantly, they found joy in simply being together. Theirs was a love that had weathered the storm and emerged stronger, not because it was perfect, but because they had learned to embrace each other's imperfections. As they looked forward to the future, Sarah and Mark knew that whatever came their way, they would face it together, with the wisdom and strength they had gained from their journey. Their story, once marked by loss and regret, had become one of resilience, renewal, and the enduring power of love. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below.